Today, I want to welcome Neil Katz. I've gotten to know Neil over the last few months, and I'll tell you, it's hard to find a more delightful conversationalist, insightful person. I've just so thoroughly enjoyed my conversations with him. And so I invited him on Leaders and Legacies, and he has a powerful message for anybody that's running a business. Neil does fractional HR. He's been advising uh, the C-suite for over 25 years. And he's promised me a salacious HR story, which is easy to believe that there's probably an abundant number of those. But anybody that's running a business, I'm confident, I'm confident that there's areas to improve in your HR. And I know a lot of businesses see HR as a necessary evil, a necessary expense. My hope is by the end of this conversation, you'll see HR as a strategic advantage. And so with that, Neil, welcome.
Well, Craig, thank you so much for having me. Super excited about our conversation. Look forward to chatting more about this. And I love the objectives of let's get people to see HR as a strategic partner, strategic advantage, and not the people you have to have on your team.
Yeah, I work for back when I worked for other people, my personality, I found that I worked best with smaller companies that were, up and growing rather than larger companies that were very established. And one of the companies, they actually use the term necessary evil. HR has become a necessary evil. And but somewhere in there, they hired a guy who was a coach to managers. And he would come in and coach me in management. It was insanely valuable. I can't express, the value of that. And I think there's a lot of opportunities. Let me start with this. What do you think leads people to see HR as a necessary evil, or just, geez, we got to do HR? What's the mindset what drives that mindset?
Craig, I think what's driving the mindset is HR has been conditioned for so many years to say no. I like to say they're the no police. The answer is no, no, we can't do that. The law says this. We become and we allow HR to be that barrier to say no, and you can't achieve this, you can't have this, you can't do this, and you can't do that. And after a while, it's a necessary evil. You got to have it. You got to be compliant. You got to be legal, and we want to ensure that. But at the same point, we don't have to say no. My philosophy is let's give them options. Let's give them choices. There's ways to achieve compliance and legal compliance in those components and still be okay. You don't have to be the necessary evil. I think the other challenge we're seeing is HR is still evolving to become that true strategic business partner. You got to understand what drives the business, what's
Yeah.
important to the business, and then integrate the people component to it. And HR a lot of times says, no, we can't do this and we can't do this. And my philosophy is I can do anything. Tell me what you want to do, and we can do anything you want. We just need a little bit of time to figure out how to get there.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, I really like that because when I think about it from marketing, and people are like, well, you know, are you saying I can't do this? I'm like, no, you absolutely can. You just have to understand, there are like anything else, there's trade-offs, and you're making some decisions. I just want you to understand the decisions you're making.
Yeah, Craig, I have a strong philosophy is I love to empower my leaders with three choices. Every chance I can, I want to give you three choices to pick from and choose from. And I had a leader once say to me, he goes, Neil, I don't like any one of these. I said, okay, no, I gave you three. I didn't say they're all great, but I am going to tell you, I gave you three choices. These are the best three choices we have for this scenario. Sometimes you can't make three good choices, but I can give you three choices and walk you through them. But the reality is you can do anything. You just got to understand what the impact is, what the cost is, and is it what is aligned with the company's culture and your vision. If you want to achieve those, we can do anything. There's nothing we can't achieve from a people perspective.
Another trend I've seen a lot of renaming. And I always get a little dubious when I see renaming. And I've seen titles like Chief People Officer, Chief Empowerment, all these titles. And when I look at them and I figure out what they're doing, I'm like, oh, they're the VP of HR. And what's behind these titles? And is it good? Is it bad? What's the skinny on that?
Think it's good because people are trying, these organizations are trying to find a way to shift people's mentality of what they believed of the past. Let's be real. HR has a belief. People know or believe what HR can or can't do. So the only way to change that, if it's rooted in years and years of history, change the name. When you change the name, you shift people's viewpoint perspective.
Hmm.
I do it in my business. Words mean things to people. If I tell you XYZ and it means something to you specifically, then people are going to be stuck with that and they add connotations to what they think that means. They're not open to, well, is really a chief people officer something different than HR? Maybe, maybe not, but it gets you to start thinking potentially different. Now, just because you change your name doesn't mean you change anything else. So if you're going to change your name, change the outcomes, change the motivation, change the results, change the behaviors of that person or position, then it'll hold. I have seen too many companies change the names just to try to shift it. You can change anything if it doesn't, if you don't shift the outcomes and behaviors, I can call you chief of chiefs. Doesn't matter. Doesn't change anything. So you got to change. If you're going to change titles, change the components related to those titles, including the functions of the role. Then that's when it'll stick.
It's kind of like the companies that spend thousands of dollars, or if they're a big company, hundreds of thousands of dollars to come up with new values and a new mission statement, and they put them on the wall, but
Mhm.
all the behavior's still the same.
Correct. Spot on. Change behaviors, change beliefs, change practices, or don't change. And that's okay not to change. But you're right. I've seen so many companies go through a rebranding, reinitiative, a mission, vision, values. And 2 years later, I'm like, what was the impact? Well, nobody changed anything. Okay, well, we got all new slides and pretty wall hangings and all these great things with mission, vision, value, but it didn't change. It does no good. I'd rather tell you be willing to accept change, pick the things you're going to change, and then change it.
Yeah. One of the stories I've heard, I mean, obviously, Google was notorious for their employee benefits. You don't hear much talk about it anymore. But, 10 years ago, you heard about many things. One of the things that you heard about was the sleeping pods. And I remember when I first heard about that, I was like, oh my goodness, I would kill for that. I mean, there have been times when I started on business on my own, and I was working out of my home office where 2 o'clock in the afternoon rolls around and I lay down on the floor and I take a 15-minute nap. And I
Mhm.
wake up reinvigorated and ready to go. And I thought, these sleeping pods are really smart. And then the more I heard, I was like, they started calling them the fire pods because the people, it was like they were getting their list of who to lay off by whoever was in the sleeping pods. I'm like, wow, I think in legal speak, they call that entrapment.
I could see that. Yeah. I mean, I look, you should evaluate people on performance. Like, if you took a 15-minute nap and your performance exponentially increased, I'm going to encourage you to take a 15-minute nap every day. I'm going to celebrate you for taking that. I'm not going to punish you for it. It should be based on output, results, performance. But here's the other thing I think is missing. What do I expect of you? What is my expectation of you as a leader? What are the measurable results? And am I clear and succinct? And where are we aligned? Whether you take a nap, look, there was, I think it was Best Buy or Target, I don't remember which one, had a period of time where they actually let their corporate teams build their own schedules to align to their personal and professional needs. There were people taking off to go watch movies in the afternoon.
Hmm,
But you know what? Or somebody would leave at 3 o'clock to go pick up the kids from school, get them home, get them settled for dinner, and then go back to their home office and work for a couple more hours to finish up their day.
yeah.
We aren't what we used to be, this 8 to 5, Monday through Friday in the office. I don't think it's going to survive. I think we have to be adaptable as a business and flexible, but be very succinct on our results and our expectations of our teams.
You know, when you talked about that, there were a few things that just flashed through my head very quickly. And it was all, around how COVID changed everything. COVID changed the perception of the work environment. And, I had like half a dozen questions flash through my head. of, okay, are we returning to the office and all of that? But here's what I think is more of a core question. And this has been my concern about the work from home is how do you build a cohesive culture when people aren't rubbing elbows day to day?
So here's my answer to you. How did you build a cohesive culture when you had 30, 50, 200 offices throughout the globe or throughout the US? You made it happen. You can make anything happen if you put an effort, energy, and passion to it. How do you engage your team? How do you build cohesiveness? You teach it, you educate it. You don't make every Zoom call all about the meeting. You introduce people, you educate people, you create camaraderies and partnerships. You build cohesive teams outside of these Zoom meetings, whether they're face to face or in the office. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Where I struggle here is we are seeing this as a one or the other choice, in office or work from home. And the reality is, I do believe hybrid will win this one. I
Yeah.
see us in a hybrid environment where 2 to 3 days a week you're in the office and 2 to 3 days a week based on your company, you work from home. And I think that's really where we'll see the synergies. But just because you call it work from home or work in the office, part of that is setting expectations and guidelines of what do you want that engagement to be? How do you engage each other when you're sitting next to each other?
Yeah.
Part of it is if we just put you in the office and don't say anything, doesn't change anything, doesn't change behaviors.
Yeah. No, and hybrid addresses the question that I have about, and it's about culture. Um, it it doesn't, you don't have to have 40 hours or 60 hours, elbow to elbow, to build culture. But hybrid, I at least there see the bridge of, there are values and there are cultural elements that are more easy to communicate when you're together some of the time rather than none of the time.
Correct. And you're spot on. I mean, culture is going to build and enhance and develop when you're together. But here's what I always tell leaders. My favorite question I'll ask a small scaling business is this: what is your culture? And the first answer is, well, we haven't defined it yet. And my answer back is, you already have it. They're like, excuse me. I'm like, culture is there, whether you're in the office, you're on Zoom, you're on Google. It doesn't matter. Culture exists every single day if you bring more than one person together in a company. It's culture.
Yeah.
Question is, what is it? How do you manage it? How do you influence it? And how do you change it if you don't like it? But if you don't think you have culture, you do. Culture is there every single day. So the question I have for any leader is embrace what you have and then change what you want.
Yeah. It reminds me of a phrase I heard recently. It said, your current systems are perfectly designed to get the results you're currently getting.
Mhm.
And, and I think that that would apply to culture. Like you said, you do have a culture, and your current systems that are driving culture are perfectly designed to get the culture that you presently have. Is that the
Exactly.
culture you want?
That's the question. What culture do you want? You, as a leader, as a CEO, founder, C suite, whatever level you're at, it is your choice. Now, if you don't like what you have, change it. Change the system, change the process. And by the way, changing remote to in office or hybrid isn't going to necessarily just change the culture. It'll have an impact, but it doesn't force change. So that'll have some, but there are other, as you said, I can create all the great mission, vision, values all day long, but if I don't change my behaviors related to it, it doesn't change anything.
Yeah. So here's a question I have is, and I may not be framing it correctly. So if I'm not, please help me reframe it. But when I think about HR, I think about two sides of the ledger. There's the compliance side of the ledger, which I think most people think about when they think of HR. But I also believe there's a value add part of the ledger. And uh, one, is that the right construct? And two, if it is, what does that look like? How would you communicate that to somebody looking at, you know, taking their HR in a new direction?
I would say yes, generally that's how I see it as well. There's a piece of compliance laws, good conduct and behavior, rules, policies, procedures. That's always going to be a part of HR, and that's never going to go away. And that should be there. You want a solid foundation, but it doesn't need to be your entire business model related to people. The other component is the strategic, is what I like to call it. And my vision is this: how do I build people, processes, and goals and objectives aligned to the company? So if a company says, I want to expand into 3 new markets, I take that and build the people goals and objectives. That's what we do. That's what HR should be doing. What does the business need? What are going to be the barriers that will slow the company down when they say they want to achieve a 50% growth rate next year? They want to acquire 4 companies. The company shouldn't have to worry about those people related challenges. That's HR's role. That's where we come in. We become that strategic partner, that ally, to help them work through that and say, what does it look like? Well, the first thing is any growth. My first question is always is, who's in the leadership pipeline to fill? Who are you going to promote? Who are you going to elevate? What skill gaps do they have? What are the things? What are the leadership challenges they might have? How do we support them today? How do we start positioning them today? How do we start training them today to get ready for 1, 3, 5 years growth? And more importantly, is there a gap in the positions? Do we need to go hire 2 new leaders? Do we need to onboard them today so we can be ready for 6 months with that acquisition, that organic growth, whatever it may be? Our job is to provide those people, the systems, the technologies, those components to ensure you have an engaging workforce. Companies, my philosophy is, you give me the metrics, you give me the goals, we'll build everything related to people to support you so we can get you there. Because that's what a good HR practitioner does. They understand the people components. And I use leadership as one. That's usually the one I start with, but there's so many other things you have to ask yourself related to that. But you work through each one of those opportunities, develop a plan, present it to your leadership, and move on to the next thing. Our job is to ensure business success so we can have people success.
Yeah. Well, and the acquisition question, that's an interesting one because um I was a part of an acquisition, got a very, very handsome, retention bonus, lasted 2 or 3 months, walked into my boss's office and slid the check back across the table and left. And acquisitions seem enormously tough to have work out successfully. What have you seen, and what advice would you give to somebody who's looking about to do an acquisition?
I think the key to acquisitions are this: be real with yourself, be real with the metrics. Generally speaking, when you do an acquisition, you're going to see between a 30 and 50% turnover rate.
Wow.
It's just the numbers. My answer is, if you doubt me, and that's fine if you do, go run 100 acquisitions, go look at the companies that were acquired and look at the turnover rate. It's generally there. I'm not saying it's always there across the board. The numbers will fluctuate, but that's why it's averaged. But the reality is, we know that's going to happen. And why does that happen? Companies change processes, policies, procedures, benefits offerings, time off, rules, strategic directions. Things happen. The reality is, if we know that's going to happen, mitigate it if we want it mitigated. So an example, one of the things, I had an opportunity early in my career to help a company that was doing an M&A. And the chairman of the board said, I don't really care what the benefits are, and I don't care the policies, procedures. I'm not going to change them the first year. So what do you need? He goes, I want to know the culture. I want to know what we're getting into, what's important to these individuals, and most importantly, what's the plan that we can do to be the least disruptive we can in this merger and acquisition. And I was like, great, let's go. So we did a deep dive into a culture assessment, understood who this company was, what they were about, what was important to them. We presented it back to the acquiring company, and that company did everything they could to ensure success so that it was less disruptive to that organization, because they understood culturally what was important to those employees.
Yeah.
And benefits, policies, procedures, compensation, all that will come in time, but it wasn't year one. And the chairman even said, year one, I don't want to change any of that. We're keeping everything locked in for the first year, unless there's a legal issue, like we're not compliant to a law. Other than that, we're not changing anything. That was a great message, because then they came in to learn the company, learn the culture, learn the teams, learn the people, and continue to help support them achieve success. That was probably one of the better acquisitions I've ever been a part with. And I'm going to tell you, it was a great success for me. And I think that's really the opportunity companies have is now you can go and be disruptive if you want to be, but you got to know what you're getting with disruption.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I love the fact that he wanted to understand the culture because I think however you argue it, the people that are in an organization that you're acquiring, they're there in large part by the culture,
Mhm.
and if you go in and you disrupt that, you're disrupting the foundation that's held them in place.
Exactly. And as you said earlier, retention bonuses and all those things are good strategies. But at the end of the day, if I'm disrupting your cultural experience in your work tremendously, it doesn't matter. There's a certain amount of money sure, it'll make sense. But generally, a couple $1,000, people are not going to stay at a company that they're not happy with when 6 months ago they loved who they were working with and for. And now all of a sudden there's a new face, a new chair, a new name. They don't like it.
Yeah.
Money will not retain people long term ever.
No, and yeah, that company when they actually the retention bonus came in three tranches, as I'm
Mhm.
sure that's no surprise. First tranche was big and they paid it up front. And I think they were hoping everybody went out and bought a car. I know somebody who did
Mhm.
with their retention bonus. And so when I sat down with my boss, I had to write a big check out of my personal bank account. It was not foregoing money. I was actually had to write a big check.
Right.
And it was painful, but it just, again, my personality, I don't work well in large companies. And we had been acquired by NXP Semiconductors, which is a multi-billion, multinational, Dutch
Mhm.
company. And the it just wasn't I reached the point where I was like, okay, for me to survive in this environment, I need to become comfortable with seeing things break daily and be okay with that.
And that's not you.
That's not me. And
Right.
things were breaking on the customer front. We had
Mhm.
our team in Korea, for some reason, there was some war going on between the applications team and the applications engineers and the sales team. And literally they were on the same floor in the same room in Seoul, but we couldn't get these people on the phone at the same time. So we would have to have two different phone calls to communicate the same message to these two groups because they hated each other.
Wow. That's the challenges with mergers is companies are so focused. And look, you don't want to merge and acquire a company if it's not financially a good long-term strategy, short-term, long-term strategy. But there's more to it than just the numbers. You got to know the culture. You got to know the business. You got to know what's going to happen if you bring in 50% change to this organization. Are you ready to lose a third to half your staff? And by the way, if you are, that's okay. And if you're okay with that, then build a plan to support it. I'm not here to say you can't do that or you should. I'm here to understand, as we said earlier, make sure you're aware of what happens with your decisions. And let me give you some choices to come to good opportunities going forward. But don't go into this blind to think you're going to be disruptive and change everything and no one's going to leave. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
People leave.
Well, speaking of people, people are the spice of life. I mean, I would say people provide whatever yeah, separate from the discussion about diversity, people are uniquely diverse in how they bring weird things to the workplace. And somebody who's been in HR as long as you have has one of these just bizarre stories of something you saw happen. I'd hate to wrap up this interview without hearing something salacious, something juicy that just makes your jaw drop.
Well, Craig, I could sit here for 2 hours and tell you tons of stories, but I'll give you one. And yes, there's always something amazing with people. I love to say people amaze me every day. The question is, what type of amazement is it? Sometimes it's good, many times it's not. But you know what? Most of it doesn't surprise me anymore. But here's the story I'll share with you. We were doing a tour of a city. Myself, some of the executive leadership of this organization, small retail company. They had multiple units in multiple locations throughout the city. And we would go around as a team and go visit them all and go in and do this kind of pep rally thing. And it was all exciting. And it was going well. First day was good. Second day, it was the early morning meeting. It was just about when this store unit was going to open. It was in a mall. And the entire team, there's like 8 of us. We walk up to the store and the store's open and we see nobody, no employees, no nothing. We're looking around and we're thinking, well, that's weird because normally you have somebody forward facing looking, and the executives are looking, and the district manager's like just frantically trying to figure out what's going on. And all of a sudden we hear a noise, and the noise is in the back of the store, and kind of, we'll call it the stockroom-ish area. Not a big area, but big enough. And you just hear this noise, and everyone's looking around, and then you hear a little bit more of a noise and a bit more of a noise. Short version of this story is the leadership turned to the district manager, said, you need to go resolve this problem, and we're going on to the next store. So without using too much imagination, we'll just say there were 2 people in the back room conducting some personal business.
Yeah.
In the back room.
Doing an inventory check.
Yes, we'll call it an inventory check. One of the radio stations I listen to calls it doing laundry. We'll just say that. We'll just leave it as an inventory check or laundry. To say the least, of course, that individual was exited out of the building within a few minutes, and we moved on to the next store. But to say the least, that's not how you expect a store visit to go with your executive leadership team.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. It's funny. One of the things that I've learned about the TV show Seinfeld is most of the things that happen in Seinfeld were actually based on things that happen in real life. Including George Costanza throwing an absolute tantrum, calling his boss a jerk and quitting, and then coming back in Monday morning and showing up at work as if nothing had happened. Larry David did that in real life.
I will tell you, Seinfeld, the other one was The Office. I mean, if you watch The Office and you see some of the stuff on there, the joke with my family was like, oh, we're watching Office. I'm like, I can't watch it. Like, well, I'm like, that's my job. They're like, okay, ha ha ha. I'm like, no, really? That happened a month ago. That happened 2 years ago. That they're like, seriously? I'm like, yeah, that stuff happens every day. You guys just don't know it. So I couldn't watch The Office just because that was my job every single day. And it was like, yeah, I can't watch this repeat every single day on a show when it's happening in real life. No, thank you.
Yeah. Well, Neil, this has been fascinating. Real quick, so obviously you're fractional HR. You help people with HR. In a nutshell, what do you do for people, and what type of businesses?
Yeah, so I'll just do the quick pitch because I'm not here to sell anybody. I'm just here to educate. We provide fractional HR services to small to medium-sized growing companies. And myself and my team, we have about 20 people on the team. We could support you throughout the United States. We support any business, 25 to 500 employees, and anything related to HR and people needs, we've got you covered. We'll take care of you. My goal for all of our leaders today is to get back to why you started doing what you're doing. And as I love to tell my leaders is this: you didn't start this business to be good at payroll. You did not start this business to know everything about benefits, and you should never be an exceptional recruiter. So let us do that for you. Go back to what you started for, just customers, business growth, strategy, customer engagement, but it wasn't any of those other things. So we'll take care of the HR side. You go back to doing what you enjoyed, and we'll get you where you need to get to.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, how can people reach you?
Best way is my website, exceptionalhrsolutions.com, or on LinkedIn, either one of them. They can direct message me on either one and get in touch with me anytime. And what I always say, Craig, is this: if you got a simple question and you just need an answer, drop me a note on my website. We'll connect with you. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. Because it's that one question that everybody needs help with, and we're here to support and help you.
So exceptionalhrsolutions.com, and it's Neil Katz. You're on LinkedIn, of course.
All over. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Well, I hope people will reach out to you. And Neil, thanks for sharing your stories and your perspective on leaders and legacies.
Craig, thanks for having me. It's been a great podcast, and I look forward to hearing from some of your folks to see if we can be support and help.